Welcome into another Hump Day edition of Mic'd Up here on Pittsburgh Sports Live and across the Pittsburgh Sports Now family of networks. I'm your host, Mike Asti. I am joined by Mike Vukovcan. And this broadcast, as well as all the Mic'd Up broadcasts here on PSL and PSN, by Martin Lawn Services. Martin, 412-849-5894. Call him and he can help you with all your lawn care service needs. And this show, like yesterday's show and like most of the shows right now, with also the focus on college basketball, of course, once we get toward the end of the week and the weekend and the weeks after. But right now, the NFL is owning the headlines. Right now, the NFL is churning the madness, and a lot of it's focusing on the Pittsburgh Steelers. Not really too surprised for me and many who cover the team, but seems like some fans are surprised. Nonetheless, Steelers are involved in the news. Yesterday, we touched on Cam Sutton coming back, Bud Dupree exit, but there's a lot more going on with the Steelers now, with Mike Hilton now no longer a Pittsburgh Steeler, as he'll stay in the division and go to a rival in the Cincinnati Bengals. Vince Williams, maybe more of a surprise, but not really, but maybe some could say that's a surprising move, with Vince Williams leaving and being released by the Steelers, so his Steelers tenure is over. His destination not yet known, of course. And maybe what the Steelers are going to do from here as well, because still needing to reconfigure themselves underneath that salary cap to be able to have a season moving forward here with the draft coming up. And maybe we'll touch on some recruiting news as well and kind of foreshadow what's going on in the recruiting touch over there at Pittsburgh Sports Now. So, Mike, to start things off, all the news yesterday, all the news today. It's not even official yet until 4 p.m. today where these deals can actually be signed, but we know everything ahead of time with this legal tampering period. We know that Dupree's gone. We know the moves that are being made for the Steelers. So far, more players leaving town than staying. And Mike Hilton ends up exiting after Cam Sutton re-ups with the Steelers, and Vince Williams being released by Pittsburgh. What are your thoughts in terms of the Steelers' losses? How much will that impact the Steelers? And are any of these surprising to you?
No. Yeah, I guess the only thing that might be surprising is the fact that the Cincinnati Bengals spent money to
Sure.
to lure Mike Hilton there. And it's interesting that I don't know. Maybe he took the money, didn't go to maybe his best chance to win. Because I find it hard to believe that a bigger team that had a chance to compete, but this is going to be his big payday in his career. So, he played his ass off when he was with the Steelers here. He made himself into a very valuable player. When Mike Hilton signed with the Steelers a few years ago, nobody that covered or followed the Steelers knew who he was.
Right.
Now, for the past year, he's been, at least for the last couple months, he's been a guy that's been on the Steelers fans' minds, the Steelers media, saying that they wished he was the guy that the Steelers would be able to keep. So he obviously earned it. So good for him. But there was no way they were going to be able to keep him. I'm sure they're going to be able to replace him maybe in time, probably not next year. And I don't think that that's a bad thing. And, as far as the Steelers, where they're on the cap now, Mike, they're $5 million under the cap, but basically they're even. So they have no more money to spend as far as until they do some other things. And that led to Vince Williams being gone, which I didn't surprise me at all, especially with Robert Spillane, the way he showed up last year. Did it surprise you?
I think that's the factor. I think that if Spillane didn't step it up, as much as it made sense money-wise to unload Vince Williams.
Yeah, they couldn't have got rid of him.
They couldn't have got rid of him if Spillane didn't step it up. Absolutely.
Were you a fan of I know he was a media he was a little bit like Stephon Tuitt, Cam Hayward. He was that go-to guy in the locker room.
Yeah.
He was outspoken, but he wasn't a lot of what he said made sense. A lot of times guys like that kind of run wild with what they say, and they you listen to what they say and they no basis. But Vince Williams was a good interview, and I think he was a really good character guy for Mike Tomlin and Kevin Colbert in the organization. And I'm sure this wasn't an easy thing for them to have to do.
Vince Williams is a loss as much in the locker room and off the field as it is on the field. For me, for years, he was an underrated player on the field, I think, like Mike Hilton. This kind of also shows that when you have underrated players who are either playing on rookie deals or spend their entire time with the Steelers and aren't getting the national recognition, that's when you really need to seize the day and win, because they're not getting tons of money at that point. These players have now played themselves into those big mega deals, or at least more money, and now the Steelers didn't get enough wins, and now they're no longer able to be on the Steelers. They have to be casualties. But Vince Williams, I talked to him a bunch over the years covering the team, always friendly, always willing to talk, win, lose, or draw. And also, even just going back to this past season, when the Steelers had to really put out a few players that they wanted to basically say, these are going to be our spokesmen when we're talking about social justice or different issues like that, it was Cam Hayward, and the other one was Vince Williams. So the Steelers clearly felt like, and that was obviously a controversial topic, so I'm sure they were thinking, we got to pick somebody that's going to say the right thing, but not going to get crazy, not going to say anything controversial, not going to be picked up on CNN like happened years earlier. So they felt comfortable with him. He's mature. He was a veteran. They knew he wasn't going to say anything that would defame the franchise. And he's friends with Cam Hayward. I mean, I actually saw there was somebody tweeted us at Steelers Now a Photoshop image of the Will Smith final scene in Fresh Prince when he with the Cam Hayward jersey and standing out there looking for everybody. Yeah. When you think about it, if you're Cam Hayward and he restructured to come back, he loves the Steelers, wants to win with Pittsburgh and be a part of the Steelers' legacy, but you lose your friends, you lose your fellow leaders in the locker room. I mean, I guess I'll ask you that too to kind of volley it back. Obviously, some of these moves, we all knew in the know that these moves were going to be made. The writing was on the wall now for years. And yes, on the field, some of these guys aren't as good as they used to be, so that can be replaced. But we're talking about off the field and the importance of leadership after the drama they dealt with for so many years. Yes, Cam Hayward's still a leader, and he's still there. But a lot of the leaders that were there are no longer there. T.J. Watt, not really an outspoken guy. Never heard him talk in the locker room. Ben's not even that type of guy all the time. So it's really just Cam now. Is that an issue for you, in your opinion, that now they not only lose players, but they lose their locker room leaders? So it adds more pressure on Cam. And now they're kind of a young team that they almost need new leaders and new faces of the franchise, especially on defense. Is that possibly an issue for you?
Well, I think they have a couple of guys that are sort of underrated a little bit. Obviously, everyone's going to – the number one guy has been for years and will continue to be until he is no longer with the Steelers is Cam Hayward. That's
sure.
You know, he's sure. But after that, I think Stephon Tuitt is a guy that
he's underrated as well.
Yeah, he's an intelligent guy, respected both sides of the ball and by the coaching staff. I think Joe Hayden is another one of those guys, been there, done it. The way he's carried himself since he's arrived here, and the guy in offense, I think probably the leader, quiet. But I think he has the respect of everybody, including number 7, and that's David DeCastro. The funny thing, though, is when you talk about guys that I think David DeCastro has one more year left in him before he probably retires. So they're not going to do anything with him. But when you talk about down the road, guys they might have to either ask to restructure, pay cut, or altogether get rid of, two guys that I would think would be candidates. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but I think their name has to come into the conversation, and that's Joe Hayden's number 1.
Yeah.
And Stephon Tuitt, I don't know. He makes a lot of money. Last year was the first year he really played well, and he didn't get hurt. You'd have to wonder if he, would take one for the team or do something, because he makes a heck of a lot. There's not a lot of other places to go on that team with guys that are making money. So those are the guys you have to go to, but those are the leaders. I don't know. Maybe they'll be like Ben and step up and do what they have to do for the team.
Well, that was a topic a few shows ago for us, and Joe Hayden actually responded to a tweet of ours and didn't appear, because we don't know what these players are going to do yet, but it didn't appear Joe Hayden was too thrilled about the notion of restructuring. Obviously, this would be his last deal. He's looking to still have money. He's an older player. He's declined. He's injured a lot. But he can still absolutely be effective when he's in there. but that price tag is high. So I would be shocked if they don't at least have the conversation with him. Would you be willing to restructure? If he says no, they might have to make a similar decision like Vince Williams. If he says yes, great. But you got to at least ask him. It seems like unless he's going to play a full season, which has not happened at all with Pittsburgh, you're not getting enough for his value in terms of the money.
And the other guy that I think I saw it thrown out there, and I kind of agree with this. If there was a chance to keep Mike Hilton, you know, if you had to have a trade-off of Steven Nelson or Mike Hilton, which one
sure.
would you, you know, I think that's a worthwhile topic if you had one or the other. I think, but he's also a guy that maybe something might be willing to do something with his contract. Because if you look at it, I'm running down through my head guys on the team. You know, there just isn't a lot of players that you can go to. There's a few guys that make a real lot of money.
Ben already did it. Cam already did it. The others are probably going to be leaving. They already made some other decisions on the team. Yeah,
something has to be done because they're going to sign more players. They're not going to make any splash signings or anything. But in order to sign, you need some money. And right now, they're at zero. They're at break even right now. So something has to happen. So that's we'll find out though.
It's always going to be, we'll find out here in the madness of this NFL free agency period. And it's almost been crazier than in recent years because of COVID and switching up with the cap and that affecting everything. And this offseason always was going to be one to point to for the Steelers that was going to really be a pivoting offseason for the future of the franchise. A lot of these players were going to leave. They weren't going to be able to either get the money in Pittsburgh or their value would need them to restructure. It was always about this offseason. I don't know why some were surprised. I think Hayden has to be that guy. DeCastro's another one you bring up. I think Steven Nelson, to be honest with you, I'll just say this. If he doesn't restructure or they don't bounce him at some point, that signing has been completely a loss for the Steelers. That was one of the rare moves that was made that, okay, we'll add a piece to the secondary. Normally the Steelers don't do that, but he's a veteran. That'll help Hayden, etc. He was in the witness protection program most of last year. You actually could argue that there was more production on the field from Hayden than Steven Nelson. At least Hayden had a few clutch picks here or there. He wasn't healthy enough, but Steven Nelson was healthy and just wasn't doing anything. So if he's not willing to restructure, if you're Kevin Colbert, you got to think to yourself, I'm biting the bullet on that signing because that didn't really work out. And if I had to pick between him and Hilton, I'd much rather have Mike Hilton. That probably couldn't have been the decision because of the money that Hilton would be getting and the difference of age. But Steven Nelson is not at all worth the money right now. Really, neither is Hayden, as much as I love Hayden, because you mentioned Vince Williams and me being around him, covering him, and how nice he is. I also love Joe Hayden. I've said this before publicly. I think he's a great guy. He's great with the media. I'd love for him to stay with the Steelers just for that aspect. But I think the price tag is still a bit high. So there's still a wait-and-see approach with the Steelers, but a lot of moves have happened. A lot of moves have happened around the Steelers, but also in the NFL. There was a few of the moves around the National Football League you wanted to bring up?
Yeah, I want to ask you a question real quick, Mike, because are you surprised that to this point there's been nothing? There's been not even a rumor since this all started on Monday of Juju. I hate bringing him up again.
But we can't get away from it. Yeah.
I just expected. Are you surprised that we're going to enter this tomorrow and there's no Juju? Because I find this an interesting tweet here from Diana Rossini from ESPN. She tweeted here, just spoke to a free agent wide receiver to find out what's going on with all the receivers still unsigned, and he said, quote, "The wide receiver market is really bad right now." Just your thoughts on that, and you're surprised that there's been nothing, not even a team. I would have thought going into tomorrow or going into today that Juju would have a home.
The last we heard of a Juju rumor was the reports that he was calling his Steelers teammates to say, "I'm sorry, I'm going to have to leave." That was the last time we heard a Juju rumor. And that was prior to the noon legal tampering period on Monday. So since then, as you bring up, there hasn't been a Juju rumor. Granted, there's been so much else going on. Maybe it's under the radar. But I'm not I'm surprised because we always hear things all the time about star players, and he's been such in the conversation, even nationally, about what he's going to do. But I'm also not surprised in a way, because this could read the tea leaves for me that tells me, maybe as much as he's been talking about, I want fair value, maybe himself and a lot of these receivers want more than the market's commanding. This was a previous issue with running backs. This was Le'Veon Bell's issue. A lot of running backs wanted more than the market was commanding. They kept waiting. Le'Veon Bell held out for a year, etc. Todd Gurley, all of them pretty much, whether they get their money or they didn't get their money, are on new teams now, because the teams realize you can't pay a running back that much and win. You don't need to. The shelf life isn't that long. The running back position money-wise got diminished. I didn't think that would happen to the receiver position because they do have longer shelf lives. You don't get hit as often. It's not as critical of a position in terms of physicality being part of it.
It's a passing league, too.
Yeah, and it's a passing league, of course, and these quarterback numbers are just going off the charts, receiver numbers as well. But it tells me the receiver, either one of two things is happening. Either the receiver position is not being valued what it was before, or, like we talked about a couple of days ago with John Brown being rumored to the Steelers, maybe teams are realizing I can get production without having to actually have a star or pay big money. If you look at John Brown, 70 catches, 1,000 receiving yards, Juju, almost 100 catches, but 830 receiving yards. So do you want to pay Juju another $10 million than John Brown, or $15 million than John Brown, for example, when the production is only 20 catches different and less in yards by over 200? So maybe they're thinking that you can get lightning in a bottle for less money with receivers. I don't know. Obviously, he's going to land somewhere. I think some team probably will overpay for him. But this tells me that his fair value that he always wanted is about money. He does want the money. He wasn't going to take $3 to come back to Pittsburgh. He does want some money, which I don't begrudge him. It tells me he's definitely gone from the Steelers. The only way he's back from the Steelers for me is if it's a really low deal and it's almost embarrassing for him in terms of market value. But I think someone will still overpay for those stars. But it does tell me that teams feel they can draft a receiver, like the Steelers have done with Chase Claypool recently, or they think they can get that production without paying big bucks. I wasn't expecting that to happen to the receiver position, but it has.
Yeah, and to your point, the Bills might be doing that. A couple of signings that stood out to me today were the Bills signing Emmanuel Sanders. I think he's if he's not a number one receiver on a team, I think that's his best. That's the best role for him. Anyone that thinks he's a top receiver, he's not. But I think he's a really good 2 or 3 receiver on a team. And I think with the Buffalo Bills, the way they're transitioning and being led by Josh Allen, with Stephon Diggs getting all the attention up there, I think that's a perfect. He signs a 1-year, $6 million deal with the Bills to be their number 2 receiver. I think that's great. And the other, we talked about it yesterday, the Patriots again today.
Again,
Hunter Henry from the San Diego Chargers, and it goes back to their days with the late Aaron Hernandez and Rob Gronkowski, when the era was really churning as far as the Patriots offense goes. 2 tight ends, Brady running game. Now they have they signed the tight end from Tennessee. Now they get Hunter Henry.
Right.
That's 2. You probably got 2 of the best top 5 tight ends in free agency right there. So those really, really stood out to me as far as signings go. One of the things I know the Steeler fans are upset. They want to be active and they want to, they hate losing players. But I will have I'm going to be a glass half full guy here.
Okay.
They could lose all these guys, and next year, the Steelers' 2022 draft, the amount of compensation picks that they're probably going to receive.
That's true.
For the
that Ben will be gone. That'll be a whole new era of Steelers football that's really rebuilding then. So this will help that.
Yeah, they're going to get there with the players they're losing. Bud Dupree and Mike Hilton and who else?
Vince Williams, even just being released, right?
James Conner,
right? Juju,
Filer, defensive lineman that went to Tennessee or to Jacksonville.
Right.
They're going to really, I think, clean up next year. I think it was New England that did well this year. as far as extra compensation picks in the
Right. They did lose a
draft.
lot a couple years ago.
Yeah, I think Kevin Colbert is going to have a whole hell of a lot of draft picks next year in the 2022 draft.
And he's going to be around one more year on an extension. Right. So who knows how long into the future he'll be around. But it does tell me that also was important because it tells me, with all the rumors going around him this past offseason, this past month really, is that he knows how important the Steelers' next couple years are. And he's probably thinking what you're thinking. I'm not going to do this for 10 years, but we'll ride it this year. We knew we were going to lose these guys. And then I'm going to do work the next offseason with those compensatory picks. And then we'll see from then on. That's kind of what tells me by him doing one more year that I kind of can read those tea leaves. And this is just inevitable for the Steelers. And honestly, to what you're saying about the rebuild, that was inevitable too. And they hadn't won a championship or won a Super Bowl or had tons of winning success with all these players that we mentioned, as great as they all were, as collectively as great as it's been. Yeah, they made the playoffs last year. Yeah, they didn't win a division title, but they lose right away in the playoffs. Years prior to that, prior two, they weren't in the postseason at all. The year prior to that, they lose early again and get upset by the Jags in the divisional round. So you kind of underachieved as a team with all this talent. You knew you were going to lose them anyway. You don't want to overpay and ruin your cap. So it's not the end of the world, absolutely. New England, it is funny because those two tight end city, it's going to be exactly what they did with Gronk and Aaron Hernandez. It is similar. If ever there's a hope to resurrect Cam Newton for one or two more great years, this is it with the talent. I did see a tweet that I found funny is, well, it's great that Bill Belichick finally realizes that he actually has to bring talent in to win. He can't just have you and I go out there on the field and win a championship, even though he got close to that in years past with Brady bringing up lesser talent to win. But maybe if he would have done that a year earlier, Brady wouldn't have left. That was kind of paraphrasing the tweet. That Brady left pretty much saying, I'm sick of elevating lesser talent even though we were winning a lot. I'd rather have some talent around me that's equal to me. He went to Tampa. He got that. He won another ring. If they would have done this a year ago, I don't know, maybe he wouldn't have left.
I'm going to take the other side of the argument there. And maybe Bill Belichick knew that, like the Steelers are, no matter what, Tom Brady, his times
probably.
Yeah. He knows that maybe he said, hey, you know what? We're going to bite the bullet here for a year. We're going to stink, which they did last year.
Yeah.
And then we're going to clear all the money up. We're going to have a heck of a lot of money to spend in free agency. And we're going to build this thing back up. We'll be in a position with a draft pick that we're going to be able to draft our quarterback of the future. We'll have Cam for a year, which, they're going to pick a quarterback with one of their first two picks next year. Maybe he just played that out. Maybe that's what the Steelers, instead of trying to, really.
It's a marathon, not a sprint, right?
Yeah, and maybe instead of trying to fight to always be a contender, and maybe they're not going to say it, but maybe they're in that process right now too. I don't think they are, but it would be nice if the Steelers. I don't think it'd be a bad thing for them not to make the playoffs and take the Patriots' route. And especially with those draft picks, they'll have more money to spend next year because the cap's going to rise.
Right.
They can rebuild this thing up really quick.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that might be a benefit. They don't miss playoffs, though. They don't have losing seasons, certainly under Tomlin, but that might be a benefit. And Bill Belichick, I think the only hope is maybe these two tight ends and these weapons can help Cam, because the negative thing of Cam, unlike Brady, is Cam is not accurate at all, under 60% with his career. That's been his problem. Brady, incredibly accurate. So we'll see if that works out for Belichick or not.
What I want to bring up to you, Mike, is we're following on Pittsburgh Sports Now. I can't get away from my phone for 2 minutes just because I'm afraid of who's going to transfer from one of the local programs.
Right.
Corey Geiger on Nittany Sports Now dealt with it yesterday with 6 players leaving the Penn State program. I think West Virginia football, Neil Brown has gone through it a little bit during the off season. Pitt football surprisingly hasn't had to deal with that, which I think speaks to Narduzzi. But it's an epidemic in college football, and right now we're seeing it in basketball. We already have 500 players transfer. I believe it's 550 players and we're only in March. And for the whole year last year, it was 1,000. So we're halfway there, and we're only 3 months, not even 3 full months into the season. And that begs the question: is it is it bad for a sport? Are you okay with that, or do you see the side of the player as far as having rights to move on for a year, like coaches do?
Yeah, see, that's the thing. As much as I can see the annoyance and I can see the issues too, and I can see the negatives, especially when a lot of these coaches are going to get upset. Certainly, if a player is trying to move and they feel like he's going to end up in the conference or to a rival or something like that, and they're getting free reign to kind of run amok a little bit. So it is a little bit of inmates running the asylum, which I can see problems there. But you hit the nail on the head at the end of that, that it is almost fairing it up, because coaches could leave players on a moment's notice, on a dime, and really screw over the kid. Because as you know, covering recruiting, a lot of the time, unless a kid's from an area and loves the area and just grows up loving the school, which happens, but that's less than half of the situation. These players are going to a school a lot of the time for the coach, for the coach selling them on the school or the system of the coach. And then if a coach bounces, you're sitting there saying, well, I went to this school for that coach's system. I don't know the next coach that's going to come in. I don't know if we're going to get along. I don't know if he's going to like me. I don't know if I'm going to fit in. I mean, just thinking back to regionally and how big of a deal this was a decade or so ago, when Rich Rod left West Virginia, that was a domino effect all over the place, even somehow connecting to Terrell Pryor, because he was in WVU rumors prior to that, even though he ended up, of course, going to Ohio State. Penn State thought they could get him. But just system-wise, it wouldn't have made sense anymore. And then imagine being a Michigan player when a spread offense coach came to your school and you never had been that before, thinking, how the hell is this going to work and how are we going to fit in there? And really, that's kind of what sunk him in Michigan. They only gave him a few years, and his system just never was able to be there with players that fit it, because those systems require certain players. So coaches can do it to players, so it only fares it up now that players can do it to coaches as well. I think it's a little bit crazy. Certainly in college basketball, it's been out of control. I know Coach K has spoke out against it. I think there got to be a compromise. Do you see any way to compromise with this and make it so it can't run amok, yet coaches and players are a little bit more even in terms of leaving each other? Is there possibly able to go back to how it was before, but maybe have some restriction or something on coaches bouncing? Because the Bobby Petrino left Arkansas in the middle of their practice and then coached Monday Night Football and had a press conference at Arkansas, leaving the Falcons. Is there ways to derail things like that but not have it run amok as it's been? Is that possible?
I think the only thing that they can do is what's going to probably happen. I guess they're going to vote on it this summer, is the 1 year, the one-time transfer. Kids throughout their 4 years of college, they get their mulligan. They can't do this every 2 years or whatever.
I could see that.
Yeah, you get one chance to transfer, so you better make it good. You better really want to go to that school. That's the only thing, and I see it both ways. But I tell you what, if I was a coach, I just know my personality. Good luck to all these young coaches out there. These coaches around like Keith Dambrot, because I know that has to be driving him nuts, because
it makes it difficult at those programs. You like that for sure. You
just can't discipline a kid. You just can't yell at them. You just can't be tough for the coaches that's their style. It's so hard to do that, because the first time you look at a kid wrong, or you don't play him, or whatever, he gets out of your rotation, I'm going to pick up and leave. It's just so hard.
And at those schools like a Duquesne, it is, if you get a diamond in the rough and you lose them, it's very hard to get that back again. We're not talking about Kentucky or Duke, or they had down years this year, but they're laughing at it because they're going to get a top 5 recruiting class every single season forever. So if they lose one kid, no big deal. But even regionally with West Virginia losing Oscar, the team still won this year, but that was a recruit they thought was going to go to the NBA. He ends up bouncing due to situations with maybe him and Huggins or whatever, goes to Kentucky that always can bring those kids in. And who knows when West Virginia's going to get another NBA caliber recruit like that. It's not as easy for those schools as, say, the Thoroughbreds. So, that's a great point. You got to toe the line. I mean, certain coaches are not going to give a damn, really. Huggins clearly basically said, I don't care. Do what you want. I'm going to be myself. But a coach like Dambrot can't do that. He doesn't have 900 wins to brag about.
You're just going to have – it's going to be
Yeah.
Andy Cole, he's been dealing with this for years.
At Robert Morris,
With his, he's a, if you don't like it, get out. He doesn't care. I'll get somebody else. And I respect coaches that do that, and you just wonder. I don't know, it's just a tough thing, but it makes our business, our traffic is our traffic's good with all this with all these players leaving and who's going here, who's going where. So I'm not complaining about it, but I just don't every day, like I have to try to find out on a player. You just never know on a team. You think you know which team you have coming back this year, but especially in basketball, but you don't know. Like we think we know everyone that's coming back from Duquesne. I'm just mentioning Duquesne because everyone's transferred from Pitt.
We all know the Pitt story. We've touched on it countless times. Xavier Johnson in particular.
And West Virginia's probably going to deal with it because they're still involved in the tournament. But once the season starts, there's probably a couple guys on Huggins' bench that didn't play a lot and felt as though they should have been in the rotation, and they're going to pick up and leave.
Yeah, and I'll even put out the foreshadowing. I'm not saying I'm predicting this is going to happen or I've heard anything, but exactly what you're talking about. McNeil and Sherman have been up and down the lineup all season long. They've been great when in. They've been great when out. They both have had that six-man role and been fantastic. One of them might say, I'd like to start on a consistent basis, and once that decision is made, they're gone because they're not both playing next year in that five either. So it's always, that's going to be a problem. You're going to have players that are going to want to go into business for themselves. Not that they shouldn't. I mean, honestly, do what's best for you. But it does make it difficult, especially at programs like Robert Morris, because you lose a guy, you're risking getting another one. And we know what's happened at Pitt and with the pressure Jeff Capel's under, and all those exits made that season even worse than it would have been.
Yeah, it sucks for fans. It just sucks for fans, too. You just never – it's
hard to get behind a team, especially in college, when you think they're going to be there for at least a couple years, unless they're a Kevin Durant or Carmelo Anthony on the basketball end. But nonetheless, it absolutely helps business for sure. The recruiting news, how much that's churning here during COVID. Then, of course, the NFL news being even more crazy than normal and being as much madness as college basketball here with the NCAA tournament. Definitely great for business. And we will touch on that madness on the hardwood as we get towards the end of this week, because that tournament is about to kick off here with those play-in games coming up.
Yep, 2 days away. I'm going to predict when we talk again tomorrow. I'm going to give an early prediction here. I know nothing. I think people say that about me. I know nothing. But I really, in this situation, I'm going to say by this time tomorrow, James Conner is going to have a new home.
Okay.
When we're doing this tomorrow, I'm going to say James Conner is going to be with a new organization.
Okay. And as we said before, and I don't disagree with you, that's going to be not that he's nearly the greatest player to leave, but I feel like that's going to be one of the bigger local stories, just because from Erie McDowell to Pitt to the Steelers, third-round draft pick that people didn't even project to go to Pittsburgh, to stay in Pittsburgh this long, and in the market, even regionally kind of covered in high school. It'll be a big deal when he leaves, but that's a slam dunk. He's definitely gone, certainly if he cares about money, and I think they're kind of sold on him as the guy now. I don't think they believe in him anymore like they would have maybe a couple years ago. Right. So we'll see what he gets money-wise, too, with his injury history. I'm going to be curious what he would get paid. But I agree with you there. Nonetheless, though, who knows? Because nobody really can say they know anything definitively with how crazy it's been all over the newswire, especially during this NFL legal tampering period. That does it for this Hump Day edition of the show. We will be back tomorrow, potentially talking about Connor's exit and his new team. Either way, talking about the tournament gearing up, and I'm sure things will get asked nine somewhere or another that'll help us out as well. Either way, hit up Martin Lawn Services, 412-849-5894 for your lawn care needs. He's Mike Vukovcan. I think he knows about some stuff. He says he knows nothing. I think he knows about some stuff. He's Mike Vukovcan. I'm Mike Asti. For all of us at Pittsburgh Sports Now and Pittsburgh Sports Live, that does it for this one. And trust me, hit up the sites because a lot happens throughout a day, so you need to be there to check it all out.